Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So firstly, I apologize for the clickbait nature of this video's title and thumbnail, however, it's like that for a reason. It's not clickbait when the content matches the title and thumbnail of the video. In this case, if there's a worse case of journalists trampling ethics underfoot in my lifetime, then I haven't heard of it. So the story I'm about to lay out to you involves desperation, a bitter custody dispute, a kidnapping in a Middle Eastern country, and a greedy television network determined to outright manufacture a sensational story regardless of the consequences or what sort of ethics violations they have to commit to get there. Now, the story has received quite big media coverage as of late, but as of yet nobody has pieced all of this together into a YouTube video, and interest in the story outside of Australia and New Zealand seems to be light on the ground, so allow me to tell it to you from the top. Our tale begins in 2013 and it begins with the family. Mother and wife Australian Sally Faulkner, father and husband Lebanese Ali Alamin, and their two children Noah and Lahila, who were living in Beirut, Lebanon at the time. Ali Alamin ran and still runs a surfing school there called Surf Lebanon, and this was his primary business. In August of that year, a car bomb detonated a block from their family home, killing 20 people, and so they decided that it was time to move their family to Australia. As surfing is a seasonal activity, Ali returned to Lebanon in the summer months to run his surf school. All of this time away from the family seems to have put a strain on the relationship with his wife, and so this brings us to January 2014 when Sally Faulkner decided that she didn't want to continue the relationship with him anymore. Though no official divorce proceedings have ever been undertaken, reports indicate that the split was amicable. For the rest of 2014 up until May 2015, things were pretty uneventful, with Ali making trips to and from Australia to see his children. On the 27th of May 2015, Ali Alamin and the two children departed from Brisbane Airport, headed back to Beirut for what was supposedly a holiday. That was the last time that they would set foot on Australian soil. It later became apparent to Faulkner that these children weren't coming back during a series of terse Skype calls that she had with her ex-husband, and the only contact that she had with the children during this period was via Skype and phone calls. It appeared that for all intents and purposes, the children had been taken by their father with no possibility for return. And so what was happening here was a pretty common and unfortunate phenomenon: international child kidnapping. Now, I'm going to say this as a matter of opinion, but most custody cases are generally considered an absolute nightmare and have the tendency of getting ugly very quickly. But when the two parents live in different countries, things can get far more out of hand, because then working out a shared custody agreement is way more difficult, and there's often no way to compel the other parent to return the children. It's a zero-sum game. One or other of the parents will get the kids and just hang on to them for as long as they possibly can, and so this is where The Hague comes in. In 1980, the Hague Convention drafted a treaty called the Hague Convention on the Civil Aspects of International Child Abduction, which was signed by 94 countries. This treaty allows for legal recourse as long as the children are taken from a country that has signed the treaty to another country that has signed the treaty. However, as Lebanon did not sign this treaty, this road of legal recourse is closed in this case. The other way to have stopped the children leaving the country would have been, of course, to notify Interpol that they were being abducted, and then to file a piece of paperwork with them, and then they would have intercepted them the second they went out the airport on the other side. However, this didn't happen in this case, which left her with only one option for getting the children back: fighting a lengthy, expensive, and probably doomed custody battle in the Lebanese courts. Now, the children's father's actions are of course not the main topic of this video. There is an argument to be made that what he did was highly unethical and scummy, and that the children are growing up in a far more dangerous place than they otherwise would be, and where they don't speak the language. However, there are of course two sides to every story, and so this video is not intended to judge the custody case itself. that is completely irrelevant to the main thrust. What I'm looking at here is the media's involvement in this case after the father took the children overseas. Anyway, let's continue on with the facts. In early July 2015, 6 weeks from the point at which the children left the country, with her options diminishing, Sally Faulkner grew desperate to see her children, and so she went to the media. She made headlines in several articles published in Australian news sources, as well as being featured on an episode of Australian current affairs show A Current Affair, where she appeared in a distressed state pleading with the children's father to bring them back home.
Don't do this to me, and don't do this to our children.
Also, at around this time, she started a fundraiser for court costs estimated at 30,000 Australian dollars for the impending legal action, which raised just $3,597 of its goal in 16 days before closing. Clearly, Sally Faulkner was rapidly running out of options. The next few months from July 2015 to just before Christmas that year seemed to be somewhat uneventful, with the only major development being a petition created on change.org that reached almost 35,000 signatures, designed to pressure the Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop into doing something to ensure the children's return. This petition was followed up with a video in which a tearful Faulkner pleaded with Julie Bishop to do something about the children's kidnapping.
All I ask is that you listen to the pleas of myself and all the other left behind parents in similar situations to me.
This once again gave her a wave of media attention. As Christmas rolled around, however, it became clear that the children were not going to be returned, and so once again Faulkner was evaluating her options. This is where the journalism ethics part comes in, and the story starts to take a wicked turn and the chronology gets a little fuzzy. Now, before we continue, I should also mention this. Sally Faulkner had a prior relationship with the 9MSN Australian TV network, having been in A Current Affair, which is one of their shows. In fact, it should also be noted that they're the same network who carries the Australian version of one of the world's foremost investigative journalism TV shows, 60 Minutes. This relationship is actually going to be incredibly important going forward. Now, it should be stated up front that it's not known who the people who authorized the plan which I'm about to describe were, other than it was put into place by people with serious financial control over the networks, as we'll get to in a bit. So I'm just going to come out and say it. What they planned to do was this. They were going to steal the children back via a kidnapping plot, and at the same time they were going to produce a journalistic report about the entire situation. Now, it does sound absolutely crazy that a news organization would do something like this, and it actually feels surreal talking about it like that, but that is exactly what happened. They planned and executed a kidnapping of children in a foreign country. So now let us take a second to examine all the sorts of ethical breaches that this kind of undertaking creates. Firstly, journalists are supposed to be independent of the stories they report on. Journalism is simply reporting on what's happening. Reporting on stuff that you created is just manufacturing a story. Secondly, by funding this operation, they were taking a clear side in a bitter custody dispute, which throws all notions of objectivity completely out the window. And of course, thirdly, and possibly most pertinently, they engaged in a criminal conspiracy to commit quite a serious and, as it turned out, violent criminal act. However, all of this ethical and legal stuff must have clogged up the wastepaper basket at Channel 9, because by January 2015 they were ready to go. The person that was chosen to run the child recovery operation was Adam Whittington, a former SAS member and Scotland Yard detective who now runs an international organisation called Child Abduction Recovery International. According to Whittington's mother, he was contacted about doing a possible story for Channel 9 in October or so of 2015, which, if true, places this operation's planning time in the range of 4+ months. Whittington is a seasoned operative with over 100 different child recovery operations under his belt, one of which got him jailed in Singapore in 2014 2015, another in which he barely escaped jail in March 2016, which left one of his operatives stuck in a Peruvian prison, and another incident in which he is alleged to have pepper sprayed a grandfather to get the child away from him. Whittington, who's based in the UK, wasn't the first person they tried out for the job though. They had earlier considered using a prominent private detective, Colin Chapman, but for some unknown reason the deal fell through and they went for Whittington instead. Another event to take note of happened in December 2015. According to a statement from Australia's Family Court, parenting orders were made in December 2015 on the application of the mother outlining arrangements for the children in this matter. These orders were made after the children were in the physical care of the father. According to a court spokesperson, one of these orders related to issuing new passports for the children. Furthermore, on the 22nd of January 2015, leaked financial documents which would be later used as part of the Lebanese state's evidence showed that Whittington had been paid $69,000 by 9MSN, the network who run 60 Minutes. According to Whittington himself, a second transfer was also made, taking the grand total that he was paid to $115,000. Now, Channel 9 hasn't denied making these payments because they can't deny making these payments, but they have said that these payments weren't for the kidnapping. Instead, these payments were to Whittington just so that they could follow Whittington around. In reality though, how independently Whittington was acting and this distinction between paying for a story and paying him to kidnap people matters very little, because the money that was given to him was used as part of the operation anyway, especially considering the operation involved elaborate and expensive activities such as hiring a yacht, and so the network funded the operation anyway, and it's a breach of journalistic independence no matter which way you slice it. That is, unless you buy the claims that Sally Faulkner hired Whittington independently when she couldn't even afford the $30,000 that she needed for legal costs. Anyway, with the payment complete, the operation was a go, except for one fatal flaw in the plan since the beginning. Ali Alamin had access to his former wife's email and Facebook accounts, as well as a family iPad which held a lot of information about the early stages of the plot up until December 2015. He didn't know exactly what was about to happen, just that something was in the works, and so he informed authorities about this. And according to some sources, he cut off contact with her after finding these emails. Anyway, this brings us to April 2016, when the wheels of the plot really start to go round and round. Adam Whittington arrived in Beirut on a yacht via Cyprus, which docked at the Movenpick Hotel under the pretense of them being lost at sea. According to Lebanese officials, there were 5 people on the boat when it docked. Whittington and his accomplice Craig Robert Michael, a Romanian man believed to be the ship's captain who's still at large, and 2 women, a Dutch woman, Antoinette van den Berselaar, who was later arrested, and another woman who does not appear connected to the plot. Once in Beirut, Whittington hired 2 locals, Mohammed Hamza and Khaled Barbour, allegedly as drivers for both the film crew and the people who are going to be doing the kidnapping. The TV crew, composed of veteran reporter Tara Brown, producer Stephen Rice, cameraman Ben Williamson, and sound recordist David Ballment, as well as Sally Faulkner, arrived by plane instead, where they were immediately spotted by Lebanese authorities who notified Ali Alamin straight away. What happened next is really the interesting part. So on the 7th of April 2016, the children's grandmother and a nanny were walking the children to a bus stop where the kids would catch their school bus in downtown Beirut. Nearby security camera footage captures what happened next. Just as they come close to a nearby parked car, 2 men jump out of the car on the roadside and head around towards the women. One of them makes a grab for a child as the other surrounds the women from the other side. There is a brief scuffle during which one of the women is thrown to the ground. This is the children's grandmother, who was allegedly pistol whipped during their altercation. According to the children's father, his mother suffered 3 internal head injuries from the incident, but they weren't life-threatening and she made a quick recovery. Shortly after the grandmother goes down, the other woman can be seen running for her life. Allegations later surfaced that the kidnappers, whoever they were armed with handguns. The 2 kidnappers then grab the children and run back around the car to the door that they got out of. While this is going down, the entire thing is being caught on film by a cameraman who's filming out of the front seat of the car. Once the kidnappers are safely inside, the cameraman jumps back in and the car speeds off. All of this took just over 10 seconds. There was also allegedly a second car that contained the 60 Minutes crew that was following this car, but the exact placement of who was where when during the kidnapping is spotty at best. Accounts vary from Whittington being one of the gun-wielding kidnappers to the two Lebanese men being the kidnappers, and so it's really difficult to say the precise details of who did what. However, what happened next is that another grave error was made. One of the things that was arranged as part of the plan was a safe house in Beirut, Muhammad Hamza's mother's apartment in fact, which is where Sally Faulkner was reunited with their children shortly after the kidnapping. What she did next though was to phone her husband from an unsecured line at this address, which the police of course traced and raided later that evening, which netted them Faulkner and the 60 Minutes crew, as well as the children, which were promptly returned to their father. In the few hours between the kidnapping and Faulkner's arrest, Faulkner sent a flurry of text messages to Graham Chapman, the other private investigator, looking for a way out of Beirut because Adam Whittington had just been arrested and the yacht which they were going to use for their escape had just got impounded. All in all, 10 people were arrested and charged with armed kidnapping and being part of a criminal gang, crimes which carried up to 20 years with the possibility of hard labour. These were the 4 members of the 60 Minutes crew, Sally Faulkner, the 2 Lebanese accomplices, Whittington and his partner, and of course the Dutch woman. A few days later, 2 of these people were released, dropping the total number of suspects down to 8, which by process of elimination means the Dutch woman and one of the Lebanese accomplices was released. They were set to stand trial shortly thereafter. However, Faulkner and the television crew never made it to the trials. Instead, they reached an out-of-court settlement with Ali Alamin, the children's father. According to the Daily Telegraph, this deal cost the network 9MSN 500,000 Australian dollars, after Alamin had scoffed at their previous offer of $350,000. In exchange for this money, all charges seem to have been dropped, though the details of this deal are not public at this stage, and it should be noted that the children's father did deny that he got any money out of the settlement. Meanwhile, Channel 9 MSN are currently undergoing an internal investigation into how this expensive and reckless piece of journalistic disaster came to be. However, that of course is not where it ends. Muhammad Hamza, the 26-year-old who was hired as a driver, Adam Whittington and his partner still remain in a Lebanese jail, where they sit until this very day on the same charges. And so all of that takes us through to where the case is right now. So by way of conclusion, all I'm going to say is this: there are no winners here. We have over $600,000 paid out by the network, resulting in no story, besides the story of their own incompetence of course, 3 people left languishing in a foreign jail cell, and the custody situation, which is pretty much exactly where it was months ago. And of course I should point out that even if they had got the story cleanly and got away perfectly, it would still have been of very little value, considering that it was a paid for piece anyway, and would most likely be faced with a public outcry regardless. Add all of that up and you have what has to be one of the most egregious, expensive, ridiculous and perplexing journalistic missteps of all time. I've been Dangerous Analysis. Thank you to all of my patrons and subscribers, and as always,
good night and good luck.